Mr. President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague from Utah about his eloquent comments on the Supreme Court nominee. I'd like to associate myself with everything that he said. He has the depth of experience and insight that I hope so many members on both sides of the aisle will listen to. But Mr. President, I'm here to talk about the spirit of bipartisanship and getting things done. I submitted an editorial to my local newspaper down in Charlotte a couple of weeks ago, and the whole premise of my opinion was that in November, the voters did not vote for a Republican mandate. They voted for a results mandate. They are tired of the gridlock that they see up here in Washington. They're tired of people promising things they know they can't deliver, and they're wanting for a leader in a President Trump and in the congressional leadership, people who want to produce results. They want people who want to work across the aisle and come up with bipartisan solutions to a lot of the problems that confront this nation. Now, you would have thought that I've changed my registration and become a member of the minority party with the criticism that I got from people on my side of the aisle. I was called a rhino, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a Republican in name only. When I was Speaker of the House in North Carolina, the last thing I was ever called was a rhino. We worked on a conservative agenda that made sense. We gained the support of a number of Democrats along the way. And North Carolina is a lot better place because of the courage of those folks who were willing to work across the aisle to heal our great state, to go from one of the laggards in terms of economic performance to one of the leading states in the nation for economic performance over just the course of about 4 years. So I don't really care about the criticism from the talking heads, from the far left or the far right, because I consider them one of the great threats that we have to actually turning this Congress around and getting things done. And I'm going to do everything that I can to reach across the aisle and produce solutions to some of the most vexing problems that we have, and there are solutions within our reach. If you think about immigration reform, a 40-year-old failure on the part of Republicans and Democrats to address the immigration problem. Everybody wants their position on one end of the spectrum or the other versus what the American people want, or a solution to the problem. A solution that makes sure the American worker is respected and taken care of, that our borders are secure, and that we end this 40-year-old failure on the part of Washington to solve the problem. They want solutions on criminal justice reform. We've got many people in prison who, after they get out, are more likely to go back into prison because we really haven't thought about common sense ways to help them enter back into society and have productive lives beyond going just back into a criminal enterprise. We can solve that problem, but we can only solve it if we have Republicans and Democrats come together, silence the voices who want their perfect version based on their ideology on a solution that makes sense to the average American. You know, the agenda that we want to complete can only be completed if we have people who have the courage to come to this floor and do what I consider to be political courage. It's not courageous for me as a Republican to stand up to a Democrat and oppose their view. That's my job. I'm a conservative, and I'm a proud conservative. Courage, in terms of someone who would walk onto this floor, is someone who could look at a person, a fellow Republican and a conservative, and say, we're not going to go where you want to go because we're here to get something done. Not just to make speeches, not talk about an unachievable goal, but make progress on things that are sound conservative policies. But maybe we have to make some compromises. Maybe we have to go a little bit further than we want to because we want to get something done. We want to pass things that are good. If we wait to only pass things that are perfect, then we will be guilty of doing exactly what many other people have done in this body. Promise a lot and deliver very little. So I took a lot of hits for my op-ed and my public comments about bipartisanship, about compromise, about respect, about reaching across the aisle. And I'm willing to take those hits because I'd rather go down as someone who's willing to go get something done than someone who's willing to only settle for the perfect, knowing that perfect never happens here. The Founding Fathers didn't expect perfect. The Founding Fathers introduced defects. If you read the Federalist Papers, defects that prevented any one ambition from prevailing. To have ambition set against ambition, that's foundational to our democratic institution here. We're not going after perfect, we're going to go after good. So I was really excited. I got some great comments from my friends across the aisle. I thought, you know, this is an area where we can work together. There are a lot of areas where we can't work together because our worldviews are so different. So let's not focus on those. Let's focus on things where we can work together. I thought we had a minority leader, someone who actually was committed to that. At least that's what I thought. But I have to say, I'm beginning to wonder if we haven't gotten a different sort of view of the leadership. Comments today do not reflect the comments of not so long ago. I think in 2012, the minority leader said, everything doesn't have to be a fight. Legislation is an art of working together, building consensus, compromise. I could have written that. I absolutely agree with that principle. That's why I got criticized by folks on my side of the aisle, or in the talking heads anyway, the conservative talking heads, because I wasn't willing to take a purist position. But now you fast forward, and the minority leader made this comment when he was not the minority leader. But today, this is what we're hearing, just within the last month. The only way we're going to work with him, that would be now President Trump, is if he moves completely in our direction and abandons the Republican colleagues. Does that sound like bipartisanship? Does that sound like somebody who wants to reach across the aisle and work on immigration reform, criminal justice reform, sentencing reform, things where I believe that there's a majority of people in this body, as many as 60 or more votes, that'd be willing to move legislation? I don't think so. We've got to make sure that people like this are accountable to the American people, the so-called real people, and I'll get to that in a little bit. That's not bipartisanship, and that's not leadership. That's divisiveness. That's gridlock. That's the stuff that inspired me to run in 2014. That's the thing I'm against, whether it's a Democrat saying it or a Republican saying it. Now, I think we can also expect more of what really stems or what you can infer from the latest position of the minority leader, more gridlock. If we'll go to the next chart. The sort of double standard here, duplicity, really drives me crazy. Situational ethics, I'll call it, or situational principles. On the one hand, you stand firm on something, you fast forward because you didn't like the outcome of the election, and suddenly you no longer take that same position. People can rationalize it any way they want to, but I think the real people, the real voters, the folks out there, see this for what it is. It's taking a so-called principled position when that particular position benefits your agenda. Not necessarily something that's bipartisan, something that actually serves a political agenda. The Supreme Court, I think that's what we're going to see here. I've presided, I've been a freshman for 2 years. We get to preside a lot. I get to hear a lot of these floor speeches. And I heard endless speeches talking about how we needed to do our job, actually, it's another quote here from the now minority leader. The Supreme Court handles the people's business. As President Reagan put it, every day that goes by without a ninth justice is another day the American people's business is not getting done. Now what we're hearing is that that same group of people say that they're going to use every lever they can to stop us seating a ninth Supreme Court justice. What's changed? Except for the fact that you're not happy with the outcome of the election. So I think that we need to recognize that the American people are sick of Democrats and Republicans promising things, but if they don't get their way in the election outcome, if they're not able to set the agenda, then they're no longer interested in bipartisanship. I have a lot of confidence in this body. I have a lot of confidence in a number of the people on the other side of the aisle. I think there's a pent-up demand among members here who want to see results. Not perfect, but good. And I'm going to do everything I can to work with those. And I'll do equal amount of time focused on those who I don't think are acting in the best interest of their own constituents. They're not listening to the real people in America, the real people that didn't endorse a Republican mandate in November. They said it's time to stop. It's time to get things done. It's time to treat people with respect on both sides of the aisle. It's time to accept good, and it's time to stop pretending that this body can produce perfect. Now, I have to say that I'm glad to see that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are starting to look at the so-called real people. Last week, we were in, the Republicans were in Philadelphia. We were at a retreat, and at the same time, there was a group of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that were meeting up in West Virginia. There was a Politico article that I thought was particularly interesting. This was a part of the published agenda that was reported by Politico. An agenda that says, you know, they're getting people together. They want to talk about speaking to those who feel invisible in rural America, listening to those who feel unheard, and a discussion with Trump. There was another entry in the agenda, I believe, that says talking to real people. I'm here to talk to the real people tonight. You've got members here in Senate want to get things done. We know you're hurting. We know the government's failed you, Democrats and Republicans. We've failed to actually take the tough votes. We've failed to deliver. And it's time for us to deliver. And I believe that we have a president who expects us to reach across the aisle and solve problems. And I'm going to be a part of solving that problem. We've got a great opportunity here with the Supreme Court nomination. It's time to get past the election results, get over it, and get to work. It's time to recognize that the real people, the people who sent a mandate here, but the mandate was not Republican, wasn't far right, wasn't far left. All they said was produce results. I'm going to produce results. I'm going to expect my members to produce results. I'm going to go into my conference when it looks like we're going down the path of taking an intransigent position that doesn't produce a result, and I'm going to call them out. And I'm also going to hold my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to the same standard. I'm going to hope to find folks that want to solve the immigration problem in a respectful, methodical way. I want to work with people on the other side of the aisle who want to solve the criminal justice problem, the sentencing reform, judicial reform bills that are moving through that have, I believe, far more than 60 votes to support it. We've got to work on these, and we'll save the other ones where we simply can't find common ground, and those will be the arguments that we can have that can influence future elections. But for the next 2 years, let's get work done. Let's actually be able to go back to our state and proudly proclaim that we had the courage to stand up to people on our side of the aisle when getting to perfect was at the expense of doing something good. If we do that, we'll have one of the most productive legislative sessions. The 115th Congress could go down in history as one of the most productive one of the most productive Congresses in the last 100 years. I want to be a part of that story. I want to go back to North Carolina and be proud of what I did, proud of the compromises, proud of the bipartisan relationships that we did to solve these problems. And I'm going to go to other states who may be up for re-election in 2018 and either thank the members on the other side of the aisle who worked with us for those solutions or campaign against them because they failed to actually look at their constituents and do the right thing. There's a lot of opportunities here. And I, for one, am going to spend every waking hour to make sure I do my part and I can be proud of the work that I did to produce results, to answer that mandate by the electorate that came in November to produce results. And I have every confidence that there's enough members here to join us. And with that, we will do great things. We'll fulfill the promises that we made, and there's nothing more rewarding than being able to look your constituents in the eye and say, we did it. We listened to you, we compromised, we treated people with respect, and we delivered. And Mr. President, I call on all my members to think again about what they can do to be a part of providing the solutions. And I look forward to working with them in this Congress. Thank you, Mr. President.